as we're expecting. The fact that he's paused queen sacrifice.
Seemingly out of nowhere, Magnus Carlsen sacks his queen against MVL in this first final of the AI Cup, a Champions Chess Tour event. Now I'm going to show you that whole clip later on, and then what Maxime does back is incredible, and then we get the finish to this game. Do not assume the result, because this thing is wild and it went to Armageddon, but this is the pick of the match. Now Magnus had white here. This is game 3. They'd already made 2 draws. Let's check this one out. So Magnus, he starts with e4, c5 on the board, Sicilian defense. We get knight f3, d6, d4 is the open Sicilian, and after these moves, we now head down the Najdorf variation. Magnus had just played the Najdorf with black. He managed to hold the draw despite being under some pressure, and now MVL hits right back. This is his bread and butter. Been playing it since he was a kid. So we see bishop e3 from Magnus, the English attack. Great to see on the board. Now we get knight g4, the so-called anti-English variation, and you can come to g5 here, and we get h6, and there can be some wild g5 stuff and everything, but Magnus retreats the bishop all the way back. Now the knight hops back. This could be a very boring quick draw, but none of that. We get f3 played, and now e6. The so-called Scheveningen pawn structure. It's like this village in Netherlands, right, where the name comes from. I guess they played it there a lot. Now we get the bishop bouncing back, no more knight g4, and b5. MVL not hanging about with his counterplay. We get queen d2. This is the fun of the position. You often get opposite sides castling on the board. Knight bd7 and g4. Magnus not hanging about. b4, MVL going for it. Often black just develops, but here he decides to immediately kick that knight. Now you do potentially slow down these pawns attacking the white king, but that knight is a bit out on a limb and can be a target with moves like this or this once the knight clears, so keep your eye on those tactics. Now h6, keeping an eye on g5, and this pawn you do not want to grab. Not only do you run into d5, exploding the centre, opening the bishop, but you're also running into this b-file pressure, helping black attack. So we see castles queenside, the knight hops to e5, pressuring this pawn. Amazing outpost, and it looks like you're about to get steamrolled, but you can't quite do it, or you drop this pawn, and you don't have time to slow play this as white with h3 and f4. You know, I did some clicking around. Black's counterplay comes way too fast against this knight. So b3, important move. After bishop d7, you're prepared to remaneuver that knight into c4, and that's why d5. Great move. Often a move you want to achieve in the Najdorf to open the position, liberate this bishop. Now if white captures, the black knight starts hopping. Look at the dark squares. Good game for black. So Magnus goes bishop f4, pressuring this knight, and this is where all hell breaks loose on the board, right? So you can drop back with this knight to g6, pressure the bishop, and white can even give a pawn here to then activate this knight to c4. Won't click down that whole line, but white gets a bit of an initiative. So what did MVL do? He seized the initiative. He played knight takes on f3, sacrificing a piece. I mean, I absolutely love the way MVL plays chess. He really showed it in the Speed Chess Championship. He's so fast, so tactical, and loves complicated lines, does not back down. So this one is naturally captured, and now the second pawn is won. The whole white centre has been crumbled. The queen comes here, and bishop c5 is coming. Huge initiative. But you first have to take care of this pawn because it can be captured. Now guess what? We are following here a game between Vishy Anand with white, Veselin Topalov with black from 2005. And Magnus recalled this game. He said so afterwards. Now, why is this an important point to note? Because if you go pawn f6 here, which was played in the Vichy game, well, now bishop d3 was seen there. We had bishop c5, and Vichy, in this position here, he sacked his queen by taking the knight, bishop captures, check, king f8, and then this line here. He's got 3 pieces for the queen. Fascinating position. By the way, if black goes e5, then yes, you win the piece, but white wins it back with this pin. So this stuff has been seen before. Now MVL went rook g8, now Magnus goes knight e5, bishop c5, hits the queen, and this is where Magnus unleashes his sacrifice, caught everyone off guard who doesn't know this position, but actually it is a theme in the air. So he smashes away this knight on e4, opens the d-file and wins this piece. Now what did MVL play here? Well, I'll show you that one in a moment, but first check out this clip because this is where we get the reaction from the team in the studio.
Magnus, will he retreat his queen? As we're expecting, the fact
Whoa! Paused queen sacrifice. Magnus Carlsen surprising us, not retreating to a passive square, gives up his queen, and then Maxime gives the queen straight back.
So Magnus has picked up 3 minor pieces for the queen here. Or maybe I'm highlighting the wrong pieces. You know, it should be these ones. Now MVL, he can go queen e7 to cover this bishop, ask Magnus to play on, and okay, white is a bit better according to the engine. 3 minors for the queen. But Maxime wants none of it. He immediately gives back that queen, the king recaptures, and now Magnus hops with his knight to c4, wonderful outpost, and this is the thing. He's got the 2 minor pieces in exchange for a rook and 2 pawns, which black is ahead, but because these minor pieces have got nice outposts, coordination, white is slightly better here. But Maxime is fighting, no 2 ways about it. So he goes g5, kicks this bishop into e5, and he soon wants to start rumbling this big clump of pawns. So he starts with king f6, ideas of f6 or f5. Now we see h4 from Magnus. He wants to activate his rook. We get rook a d8, MVL bringing his rook to the open file. Magnus now captures here. This rook recaptures. We could see an exchange of pawns, you know, rook here, but Magnus decides to cover that one, so MVL drops back, covers the g-pawn, bishop f4, targets for a second time, and it begs the question, why didn't MVL play rook h8, cover that important pawn? Well, if you do that here, then the problem is knight e5 comes. You hop, you pressure, and after this one moves away, say to this square here, well then there's check and the knight starts hopping, bishop e5 is coming, skewering these rooks. It's just a really bad position for black. So instead, MVL goes bishop to d4, and Magnus decides not to capture the pawn. Why did he not do that one? You know, looks very natural. Well, now black activates the pieces. They're constantly searching for initiative. And if g5, there's f6, undermine the pawn. You know, this is one of the top lines. You can drop back the bishop, check, bishop d1. This is the top engine line, and the king marches in. And because the black pieces are so active, it should be roughly level according to the engine. So Magnus holds off capturing this pawn. He plays knight e5, tricky move, hits a rook, threatens knight c6 check. So here MVL chops that one off very naturally. The bishop recaptures. Magnus has gained that bishop pair well and truly. Well, he already had it. No, sorry, he didn't. Maxime chopped it off, and now he's got them unopposed on the board. And now because this pawn is attacked, I really like how MVL deals with this one. Instead of playing something passive to defend it, you know, like this or a5, well, he goes pawn to f5. Brilliant move. Because now if you capture, well, the rook takes here, you're eliminating this clump of this pawn here, and you're letting these pawns, you know, roll down the board. So Magnus, he takes, pawn recaptures, MVL opens to defend the a6 pawn, and now bishop f4, drops back, blockading these pawns, and also pressuring this one. Again, we don't see this move played. Why not this time? Well, rook h5 is a very annoying move. Not easy to spot, but both players on top of their game. Because this pawn's attacked, And if you defend by bringing the king up, well, then you block the rook from defending this pawn and it drops off the board. If rook f6, there's bishop e5. Big problems. So the pawn not defended. a6 played, a6, a5 to defend that pawn. Now this one finally drops. Why didn't MVL pin this bishop? Well, then you drop back with check. Discovered attack. You win a rook. Now black does have some drawing chances here, 2 pawns against the bishop, connected, passed, but should be technically lost with correct play. So instead, we see rook g2, the bishop attacked, it drops back to f1, MVL now retreats, we see bishop back to e3, and look at these snipers, firing across the board. Bishop b6 could be a threat. Whoops, misfire. Hitting here. At the moment the rook covers, and I did some clicking around to see if MVL had any kind of a better plan here, but he does play the best plan with king f6. Now you could go bishop b6 immediately. Magnus decides to start with this one, king e5. And the reason this is a great plan from MVL is he's running these pawns. That's his big asset. He's got to get them rolling. Now Magnus goes rook h7. Strange move. Why would you allow f4, which MVL plays? Well, now there's check, and this is Magnus's idea. You drive back the king, and then surely you're just winning this pawn for free, right? Well, MVL has seen deeper. Magnus had to pause because actually he cannot win this pawn. This is where MVL is so tactically astute. He saw this instantly. So if you take, then black checks, the king is driven up to b2, it can't step to the d file, of course, and the second rook joins the party, shuts the trap on the black king. And you're actually getting mated because of this pawn, or you have to give up this huge material. You can technically check, the computer finds king here and then a3. So that after check, king a2, the bishop covers this mating idea, but the black king simply wins a rook. Black's completely winning. So this pawn is immune. What does Magnus do? Bishop b6. Excellent move. I mean, such a wild game. Fascinating endgame. And because that bishop has so much scope from afar, it not only hits the rook and the pawn, but still covers g1 from this check. So MVL can't make inroads. He plays bishop d7. Rook d7. It's late here. To save his rook. Now we get bishop takes. Now why would you leave this square? Well, now after check, king b2, if the rook comes down, which wasn't played, well, now the bishop picks up this pawn. This is the key difference, and obviously the king can escape the box. So instead, MVL plays f3. He runs those pawns. Great move. The bishop takes on b4. Now long term, Magnus has to be winning. All these pawns, bishop pair. But first, he's got to deal with these. We see f2, that pawn one square away. We see check. The king's driven back. The bishops, they form this boundary. So the king comes this way. Rook e5, this was Magnus's idea, coming behind this pawn. And now here MVL misses a move. So he plays rook e1 to defend this pawn, but he had a beautiful idea here to try and promote this pawn. Now, if you promote it immediately, it's not so good. Bishop captures, rook takes, this one drops, and you can see here that white is the only one playing for a win, despite being exchanged down. Should be technically winning. So promoting straight away, no good. But how can you set up the promotion with a tactic? Do pause if you want to look for this one. So there's a brilliant move here. You can play rook d3, interposing this bishop's line of defense on the f1 square. Now, if you capture, say with the pawn, well, you make the queen. This is the idea. You've, blocked out this here. If you take with the bishop like this, then you can take back. Still the pawn's going through, all that stuff. So a brilliant move. Still white had some ideas actually to keep things complicated there and keep the game kind of balanced, but it was a great shot for MVL. He missed it. They're low on time. He goes rook e1, covers this pawn and prepares e3. And of course white can't take here or you make a baby girl. So rook e6 check played. Now why not king f5? Looks very natural. Now you walk into this, check. king goes, you win the pawn. So MVL, he stays on the g file by stepping up to g5. Rook f6 now played, coming behind the pawn. e3 and Magnus goes rook f8. Classy move, just waiting on the position. You can't push either one of these pawns without losing the f-pawn. So what does MVL play? Well, rook c7. Really natural idea to eliminate this bishop. Now apparently he should have gone rook dd1 here, just to briefly show you this line, with the idea being to promote. Now white naturally pushes the a-pawn. You can get something like this, liquidation, and apparently, you know, the black king can run over. This whole line is a bit nuts. Still isn't even clear if this is a draw, but the computer says it is. So rook dd1 was the way to go to force through the f-pawn, but rook c7 was played to eliminate the c4 bishop, then run the pawn, but Magnus, he's a step ahead. As ever, the endgame go. He goes bishop d4. Maxime eliminates that bishop, but you're not obliged to recapture straight away. Magnus flicks in the Zwischenzug of bishop takes on e3, check. So after rook captures, he then picks up this rook, and the problem is the endgame is hopeless. This rook is about to snap off this pawn, and how do you defend it? You can't go rook f3 obviously. If you go rook e2, well then the white king marches over. King g4, but king d3. The rook is attacked. It has to give ground. Once it moves away, you pick up this pawn. And just to briefly show you a step further, you know, why this is hopelessly lost. Yes, black can win this. Yes, the white pawns are doubled, but the c pawn's way too fast and the black king is just completely cut. This is game over, pawns running through. So this, the final position, MVL resigned this one, but hit back in game 4, went to Armageddon, but sadly, well I say sadly, good for Magnus, but sadly for the drama anyway, Magnus held the draw with the black pieces. No upset today, you know, he rumbles on. He'll be in the grand final, playing one of the up and coming guys, Giri, some others, I can't remember who. That will be tomorrow. I am playing chess myself, so I'm not sure I can get a video out tomorrow night, unfortunately, but I'll try and bring one Friday it will be. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Do subscribe to never miss a future one, and if you want to see another epic game of chess, check out the video on screen. Thanks for watching and see you soon.